Lieutenant Ronald Speirs was one of the platoon leaders in D Company. He was already a legend.
Stories about Speirs are probably all bullshit anyway.
What stories? What stories?
Hello everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Real History, and this one is particularly special for me because I have a really big announcement, and that is that my next book is out. So this is Fierce Valor, the true story of Ronald Speirs and his band of brothers. Some of you, our most faithful and long-standing subscribers to this channel, are well aware that we have looked at all 10 episodes of Band of Brothers in depth. And I kind of hinted that I was writing this book as we were filming those episodes, but now we can finally get into the true story, the dynamics, the complexities, the nuances, the incredible stories behind this very fabled officer. What are some of the greatest points of inquiry? What are the greatest points of misconception, perhaps? And so, what I'd like to do in this brief episode is to offer you the slightest glimpse of some of the insights that you may be able to find in this book. So, now is the time to meet the real Ronald Speirs.
What did Speirs do before Easy Company?
It's a great question. Speirs was born on April 20th, 1920, and he was actually born in Scotland. And so, he's an immigrant soldier. Moves to the United States with his family, gets here around Christmas time, 1924. His dad had been involved in the armaments industry, moved to the United States after World War I had ended, built up a nice nest for his family, and eventually the Speirs moved to Boston. And Ronnie, as his family called him, was the youngest of 5 children. And his older brother, Bert, actually served as a fighter pilot in the South Pacific during the Second World War. So that's a little bit about the family background. Speirs himself was actually drafted. I mean, it seems like impossible to fathom that, this go-get-em leader was drafted. But that was the case for over 2/3 of American service members in the Second World War. And he initially became a lieutenant in the 85th Infantry Division. And he trained at Camp Shelby in Mississippi. But after only a few months, only 2 or 3 months when he was at Camp Shelby, that he learned of this new experimental branch of the United States Army. And that is what ultimately took him to the 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, where he trained with Dog Company at Camp Toccoa. And so he traveled across the Atlantic with Dog Company, conducted additional training with them in England, actually got married in England as well. You get no clue or sense of that in the series as well. And so there's a whole lot of depth and background story that we would never otherwise be exposed to if we just looked at the series itself.
Number 2. Did Speirs really get selected to lead Easy Company in the way it was portrayed in the series?
So, in the fighting around Foy in early January of 1945, as that whole assault is unfolding just a few miles north of Bastogne, where the division had been fighting for, the past several days and weeks around Christmas time and around New Year's, 1944, 1945, he was still a platoon leader in Dog Company. And while he was a platoon leader in Dog Company, he saw some of the fiercest combat imaginable during the Battle of the Bulge. His platoon was stationed not too far away from a train station around a little crossroads area known as Halt, which was just slightly a bit north of Bastogne. And it was just a constant swirl of combat. And of course, during much of this fighting, Dog Company was on the flank of Easy Company. Now, when the assault on Foy, as is famously depicted in Band of Brothers, ensues, of course, the story is that Easy Company's commander, Norman Dyke, he's taking 2 platoons forward toward the town, and he freezes for one reason or another. Now, it's interesting to point out that some Easy Company veterans, including Forrest Guth, said that Dyke didn't freeze up. He wasn't having, a moment of shock or indecision. Some claim that he was actually wounded. And the facts behind that are still contested to an extent. But Dick Winters, who is one of the battalion heads at this time, he sees all of this happening and he's just seething because he's wondering, why isn't the company moving forward?
Got to keep moving!
And so Winters is getting ready to go out there and take the attack on into town himself. Now, in the series, we see Colonel Sink beckoning him back.
Captain Winters! God damn it, you do not go out there! You're the battalion commander, now get back here!
But in actuality, Winters actually stopped himself, and he's like, no, don't do it, don't do it. Like, you have to look out for the best intentions of the battalion, not his old Easy Company, which he was, of course, very fond of. And as Winters later reflected, he said, I turned around, I looked to my left, and there stood Ronald Speirs. A shore killer is how Winters describes him. And Winters says, I don't know why he was there. I don't know the circumstances as to why he was in this spot exactly, but he was in that spot when I needed him most. Winters yells out to Speirs, Speirs, get on in there, take that attack forward, and that is exactly what Speirs does.
Now, Dick, I understand your attachment to Easy Company, but
Speirs, get yourself over here! Get out there and relieve Dyke and take that attack on in!
I would say overall, there's very little embellishment in this scene of the miniseries. It leaves a few things out. One fact being that Item Company, on Easy Company's right flank, there was a potential danger of those American paratroopers firing into the men of Easy Company. And this is when Speirs makes his iconic dash, practically through enemy lines.
We're supposed to be on the other side of the town. You see the side of them roads, right? Wait here!
Item Easy 6! What the hell?
But that wasn't the really astounding thing. The astounding thing was...
connects with I Company officer Roger Tinsley and tells him, quit firing, you're going to shoot into my men. Speirs then dashes back away toward the 2 platoons that he's taken over, and mere seconds after he departs Roger Tinsley, Tinsley is shot through the chest, he's wounded in the head, he falls mortally wounded.
He came back.
And so Speirs had this sort of dark luck, this sort of aura around him at all times, and certainly his men were cognizant of that fact. But yes, that is how Speirs takes command of Easy Company, and he became the longest serving commander of Easy Company. He actually was CO of that company longer than Dick Winters was.
Number 3. Is it true that Speirs killed POWs on D-Day?
Yeah, so yeah, this is the heated one, the one that everybody wants to know about. The reason why this has become so hard to decipher is because almost immediately, men within Speirs' battalion and throughout the entire 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment started spreading stories about this guy. Even Don Malarkey, he heard about Speirs for like the first time when he was eating rations in a Normandy church. And when Malarkey heard about these stories, he made a mental note to himself and he said, never get this guy as your company commander. Didn't quite work out that way. Shit. These stories spread like an infectious disease. People were saying, hey, did you hear about Speirs and Dog Company? He offed a whole bunch of prisoners, and was it 6? Was it 15? Was it 30?
I told you, I didn't actually see it.
Each teller of the story kind of seasoned it to their own extent.
Oh, you don't believe it?
Whoa,
You didn't see
I
it?
heard he didn't do it.
No, it was him all right. But it was more than 8 guys.
But the truth of the matter is, though, when you look at the historical record and you look at the firsthand interview of a private, 19-year-old private from Ohio that was in Speirs' platoon, a young kid by the name of Art DiMarzio. And I'll preface this story by saying that our book would not have been possible without the help and the assistance and generosity and research of our airborne scholar Mark Bando, who was generous enough to share some of these interviews with us as we were trying to piece these stories of Ronald Speirs together. So check out some of Mark Bando's books online if you can. But Bando interviewed DiMarzio on a number of occasions. And DiMarzio landed with Speirs on D-Day. They landed in the same area. Much of their stick number 62, that was their group of paratroopers who were all together. Speirs and DiMarzio and one of their sergeants encountered 3 Germans coming down the road shortly after they landed. A brief physical brawl ensued. The 3 Americans overpowered the unsuspecting Germans who were completely clueless as to what was happening around them. And it was at this moment that Speirs said very sternly to his 2 subordinates, "We can't take them with us." This was the harsh reality of the Normandy battlefront. And, you know, there are other stories and even points of innuendo about Speirs killing prisoners, and we, talk about these to a good extent in the book. But the hard truth of the matter is that Speirs was nothing exceptional in this regard. American paratroopers were boasting quite openly, in newspapers no less, in their letters home, about how they were taking no prisoners. People were very, very proud of the tally marks that they were putting in the stocks of their M1 Grands and Thompson submachine guns. Having killers in the airborne was a welcomed asset in 1944. And let's just say that these paratroopers did not shy away from it. It was a vicious cycle of violence that was constantly swirling.
Stories about Speirs are probably all bullshit anyway.
What stories?
Well, supposedly Speirs shot one of his own men for being drunk.
You're kidding. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. And there's another one about him giving cigarettes to 20 German POWs before killing them.
It was a story of vengeance and retribution, tit for tat. Americans see their paratrooper buddies dangling dead from trees, being used as target practice. They take that out on the Germans. The Germans see the same thing happening to their fallen comrades, and they likewise inflict retribution as a form of revenge. There were not many people who didn't have cold blood on their hands on the night of D-Day, Ronald Speirs included.
Number 4. Did Speirs really shoot one of his own sergeants?
Oh.
What, Speirs shooting the prisoners or the sergeant in his own platoon?
Sergeant?
What?
I didn't hear that.
Wait, shot one of his own guys?
Well, supposedly the guy was drunk and refused to go on a patrol.
Maybe they should read about that one in the book. Did we put that one in the list?
Number 5. Sorry about that last one. We know Speirs became governor of Spandau Prison at some point. What else did he do after the war?
This is one of the most intriguing parts of researching and writing this book. I got a whole new education in the Korean War and the United States military during the Cold War. Unlike most other people in Easy Company, when the Second World War ends, the 101st Division is disbanded for a time. Speirs then finds himself in the 82nd Airborne. He eventually goes back to the 101st. He very heroically serves with the Rakkasans during the Korean War. And he actually participates in 2 additional combat jumps. And so he's probably one of the few people in the United States, I would think, who had 4 combat jumps under his belt in 2 different wars. This is a guy who saw the worst sort of combat at every level, multiple conflicts, And, you know, that didn't deter him, though, from continuing to pursue a career in the U.S. military, in the United States Army. You know, it had a cost, though, because he had several wives and several divorces. As a consequence, he was married to the Army, as his one great-grandson later informed me. And he eventually finds himself in divided Berlin in the mid-1950s, took an 18-month course in learning Russian. And this is what ultimately takes him to Spandau Prison in the summer of 1957. When he takes command of Spandau Prison, there are only 3 prisoners who are living there. There's Hess, there is von Schirach, and there is Speer, not to be confused with Speirs. While Speirs was at Spandau, he had this very unique opportunity to interact with Soviet guards, Russian officers, his counterparts, and what he was doing amidst all of this is he was trying to understand his potential enemy. If there were ever to be a world war that would break out between the United States and the Soviet Union. And so he really made the most of his time in Germany in the 1950s. He also becomes a military advisor to the Laotian Republican Army, 1961, 1962, around there. And he essentially started a non-commissioned officer school for Laotian officers. And this was one of those kind of proxy conflicts in the build-up to the Vietnam War, which he may also have participated in. And we'll leave this as a little bit of a cliffhanger for our viewers. But there's evidence to suggest that Speirs may have been involved in some clandestine operations in Southeast Asia around 1964, 1965. So this was one of the really interesting parts that we learned about him. And then in the final chapter of the book, it was my favorite to write. His final years, as he was coming to terms very uncomfortably with this unwanted celebrity as a result of this book and film called Band of Brothers. So I think people will learn a lot, and they'll have a lot of questions answered about this rather enigmatic man portrayed in film. Fierce Valor, the true story of Ronald Speirs and his band of brothers, co-authored by my colleague and friend Erik Dorr, is now available wherever books are sold. If you are a fan of Band of Brothers, if you're really interested in this iconic group of combatants, it's really my hope that this book will not disappoint. So go out and get it, and I hope to meet you someday, and I'd love to sign it in person for you.